Before I call the meeting to order, I want to remind everybody in the audience, if you want to comment or discuss something that's on the agenda, when we call you up, would you please come up to the microphone? And also, if you want to be on public comment, make sure you sign in and fill everything out on the comment, on the sheet out in the front, please. We'll call the meeting to order. Jen, will you take roll call, please?
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Waldner.
Here.
Commissioner Thill.
Here.
Commissioner Corbett.
Here.
Mayor Dare.
Here. We have the agenda in front of us. Someone want to?
I'd move to approve the agenda.
Okay.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further comment, discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. See nothing under acknowledgement and appearances. Does anybody want anything taken off the consent calendar?
I'd move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Moving down into unfinished business. Number 1, approve second reading ordinance number 1614, water rate and charges. Jen, did you have anything
I
on this?
can make a couple comments. Tonight is first reading, or excuse me, tonight is second reading. We had first reading 2 weeks ago. As discussed 2 weeks ago, the water rate ordinance in front of you. The changes to that are the 5/8 and 3/4 base increased by $2.50, the 2-inch meter by $2.58, the 3-inch meter by $14.07, and the 4-inch base by $83.93, along with an extra meter charge of $1 per month. No change to the unit fees. Second reading this evening. Publication and due time to make it effective will afford us to bill this out in December of 2019 for January 2020 payable bills.
I'd move to approve the second reading of ordinance number 1614, water rates and charges.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further comments, discussion?
This is on the water rate?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's okay.
George Lee.
Thank you.
I can't remember what you said, Jen, last when I was here. How much is this going to raise in a year?
About an additional $95,000 is the estimate.
Okay. Well, I think what most people are worried about is if it gets spent where it's supposed to be spent. Sometimes money seems to wander off out of departments. I mean, we're talking, last time I was up here, you know, you're buying a new stumper for $61,000. You didn't have any money for that. I don't know where that money come from. You know, and you're buying a new garbage truck because the one Fred talked to you into buying is too big, and now you got to buy another one. We just think there's needs to be a little more caution in where the money's being spent and how it's being transferred.
That's a legitimate concern. I think, you know, the 5 of us, there's a lot of things we don't agree on, but I think one thing we agree on is the importance of reinvesting in infrastructure in our community, and that's why we're raising the water and wastewater rates and electric to maintain what we're doing over there. But there's plenty of people that keep a pretty close eye on that. And I think we try to be restrained on the transfer too. But thank you for bringing it up. It is a concern.
Any other comments?
Mike Johnson. My concern is it's not the dollar amount or the increase in the water bill. I'm just kind kind of concerned on how you came up with this. When you have a median income of 50,000 and you're basing that off of a certain percentage of the income for the utility bill, as a taxpayer, you're charging me on my ability to pay and not on the actual, let's see, some expenses, of the department. When we're throwing out a percentage of a median income, that's more like an income tax.
I'm just using it as a threshold to determine affordability, not how much money can we squeeze out of the community, but people ask, what's affordable?
Well, when you have a median income, you've got basically 50% of the people lower than the 50,000 and 50% more than the 50,000.
Yes.
So you're basing the 50,000 or your rate increase off of the 50,000. And you're saying that's like, if I remember right from reading, it's like 1.5%. Am I?
Well, the EPA establishes what affordable is for water and wastewater,
Mm-hmm.
and 3% of median household income, and I was saying we're well below that. It's difficult. What's water worth to you, Mike? I mean,
Yep.
we could have this conversation all day, but
Yeah. No, I agree with you. The infrastructure has to be kept up, and otherwise you're spending more money tearing up streets in the wintertime and fixing breaks. But kind of a cost analysis like we do in business would probably go over a little bit better.
we could spend a lot of money on a rate analysis. I guess from a high level, I'm looking to ultimately replace a mile of water main, wastewater, and street a year, because we've got about 35 miles of cast iron pipe that isn't going to make it another 35 years. So we need to cash flow a big chunk of this. We're doing an RD project to get in front of it at the beginning, but then we just got to keep chipping away. In order to do that, we need to raise rates, and that's where the money's going to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Corbin, was I right in that about every mile is about $1 million?
Yeah, that's a
It's
spitball.
just
That's
rule of-
right in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any further comments? Discussion? Not hearing any. Jen, will you take roll call vote on this?
Commissioner Corbin?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldner?
Aye.
Commissioner Thel?
Nay.
And Mayor Danner.
Nay. We'll go into number 2, approve second reading ordinance number 1615, electric rates and charges. Jen, did you have anything on this?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Across the board increase here of 1% on both the base rate and the energy charges.
We haven't had a rate. Last year was a 0% rate increase. The year before was 0%. I believe the year before that was 1%. We've had some transmission cost increases, and our purchase power costs have remained pretty stable. But in order to make everything work, we're due for 1% rate increase.
You are correct. The last rate increase for electric was back in 2017, and it was 1%.
And I think before that was 1.25, and before that was 2.25.
2.27, close. 2015 was 2.7, 2016 was 1.5, 2017 was 1%. 0 in 18, 0 in 19.
The last 5 years have frankly been pretty stable. I mean, last winter was a cold winter, so a lot of people endured some pretty hefty city bills. But from a rate increase standpoint, the last 5 years have been pretty flat.
How much money will that raise, Jen?
Approximately 100,000.
I guess looking at it as only generating 100,000, is there somewhere we could also cut out of the budget, that 100,000, so we don't have to have an increase, would be my question.
I don't have a budget to look at this point, so I can't answer that. I will make a motion that we approve second reading, ordinance number 1615, electric rates and charges.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comment? Discussion? Not hearing any. Jen, take roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Thel,
Nay.
Commissioner Welker,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Corbin,
Aye.
and Mayor Denner.
Nay. Number 3, approve second reading ordinance number 1616, wastewater user rates.
That document is also part of your agenda packet. The changes here include the $2.50 base rate increase to the residential fixed, $5 to the commercial fixed, no volume changes there, and then once again, the extra meter charge of $1 from 14 to 15.
I make a motion to approve the second reading, I make a motion to approve second reading of ordinance number 1616 for wastewater user rates.
Second.
And a motion and a second. Any comment? Yes, George, come on up, please.
George Lee again. I hope you've taken into consideration the flood that's happened, the houses that are shot, the loss of sale tax and revenue down Washington Avenue for the year. I mean, this hasn't been a good year for the citizens of Madison, the business people of Madison. And I know it's only $1 or $2, but everything is going up, and $1 or $2 sometimes makes a difference. But it's, you know, you got to think about what's happened to Madison in the last year.
Thank you.
Any further comment? Did we have a motion?
You do.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Motion and a second.
All right,
Johnson, Waldner.
all right, thank you. Any further comment, discussion?
Do you have any sense what that would, did we talk about that today when we were visiting, about what that might generate? Sewer might look like at the end of the
I got
year?
about 160,000.
Okay.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Good. We need more in sewer.
I guess I just don't know if it's the right time to be doing this, but it's on the agenda and we'll have to vote on it, win, lose, or draw, but there's a lot of businesses not making a bunch of money.
However, our sales tax has remained quite consistent and steady. In fact, it's raised a little bit this last year to date, which I find ironic. I don't know what that's about, and that's just the facts. George brought that up, and I normally would have thought, you know, with the way things have been on Washington Avenue, we'd have seen down, our sales tax revenue is up. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the cause of that is. I'm just saying I'm pretty amazed at that. So I'm not sure that in any case, again, we have infrastructure that needs repair, plus maintaining our current system. So that's my reason for wanting to support this.
Any further comment, discussion? Not hearing any. Jen?
Commissioner Corbin,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Thel,
Nay.
Commissioner Waldner,
Aye.
Mayor Denner.
Nay. Number 4, approve second reading ordinance number 1617, restricted use site fee.
On this one here, some changes to tires out at the restricted use site, along with fees if hauled by pickup, up to 18. It goes up to $18 a load. If hauled by other means, it goes up to $12 per cubic yard. It has been quite some time since we have changed this ordinance.
I'll make a motion, we approve second reading ordinance number 1617, restricted use site fees.
Second.
Mr. Mayor, again, our restricted use site has been filling up faster than we anticipated. We have a couple of large projects that have gone into that. I do think we do a good job of keeping the restricted use funds for the restricted use site. But it's time to start planning for the next one, and as Jen said, we have had some places where we haven't raised rates significantly raised rates for the restricted use site. So, excuse me. So I think it's time to move ahead a little bit on that and start planning, as Bob keeps urging me.
How much
for
time do you think we have
restricted use
left?
sites. Gary, what do you think? We don't have another school in there.
Barring any more flooding, I would say we'd have 4 or 5 years at least. We're in our third year.
Did we open
And
that
we opened
3 years
up-
ago?
Yeah,
2 years? 3 years?
3
ago?
years.
Well, not a whole lot. We had hoped about 10, but looks like it's going to be shorter.
Yeah,
than that.
you can't plan for that kind of volume with that flood. That took 2 years right off the top.
We did lease a few years ago a Bomag, and that helped us, and we ended up buying it and using that faithfully to crush things down. We probably picked up about 1.5 years, 2 years in that, not this site, but the one before that. So, we can continue to do that and make ground on that. So, and there had been, as well as the flood, and it was significant. That was a significant factor in filling it up. But also, it was been a significant amount of major construction that we dumped into that site too. So,
The home is going in there right now.
what's that?
The home up north is going in there right now.
Thank you.
Any further comment, discussion? Not hearing any. Jen, will you take the roll call vote?
Commissioner Thau?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldner?
Aye.
Commissioner Corbett?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Mayor Denner?
Aye. See, nothing under new business. Public comment.
You made a mess of your feet there. Make sure you see that I crossed George off for his, but not the other one.
Okay. Okay.
George for his direction.
All right.
Thank you.
Mike Johnson.
Promise this is the last time tonight. Mike Johnson again. I got a couple concerns on the corner of 9th and Northwest 9th and Union Avenue, North Union. I've been here on and off for the last 35 years. And with the water situation on my corner, when we get a 2-inch rain, I get water 20 feet up in my yard. It'll come right on the sidewalk and run right up. Since the school's been built, we've added to the water problem. The trailer court runs out of there, North 9th runs there, and then it runs down, and I think in front of Jim Casanova's place where there's a catch basin. But we get a 3-4 inch rain, I get water within 20 feet of the house or closer. And now I'm a little bit more probably concerned, or will be a little more agitated, since I spent all that money on landscaping, and after 35 years of being here, nothing has changed. And the intersection floods, I mean, I've taken pictures, I brought pictures, not necessarily to this commission, but quite a few previous commissioners. The other concern that I have is Union going from Northwest 9th 2 blocks north. There are so many chuck holes, potholes. I mean, you play this game, zigzagging. And I've talked to Gary about it. I've got no qualms with Gary. We're on the same page. I'm just wondering if we can get something done, because I'm getting tired of having water, sediment, gravel, sand, whatever in my yard. So,
I was up there the other day with Gary, I'm looking at a few things, and that is really true up there.
Yeah.
It is. You're right. I'm not saying what we do right now, obviously, with where we're at in the season.
oh no, in the next week or two is fine.
It's pretty-
Well, anyway, I would appreciate if we could get something done, with those two situations and alleviate some of the flooding or
Yeah.
excess water in the intersection and coming on the yard, so.
Gary,
Okay.
is that slated to be on 9th Street North?
I talked to Chad about it, and we haven't had a set date for it. No.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
But I would,
If we
I
did
would,
take,
if I did, I would like to put it on the list,
Okay.
priority list.
Okay.
How much? Just that block, or?
Yeah, I would say it's probably a block and a half. I mean, it's, yeah, because you're,
It largely runs
it's a
from
water
9th to 11th.
block. I don't know what kind of water and sewer we got underneath there.
in the water, when it rains, we could probably put a catch basin at his corner and tie it in with the one on 9th and Josephine. That goes down the alley, goes north a half a block and then down the alley, instead of tying it with in front of Jim Casanova's place.
I'll look and see.
Lois, need it. Come on.
I'm a cheerleader tonight.
You're a cheerleader,
Yeah.
okay.
Bob's gonna go ahead. Even more reason for you to
And,
go
and
first.
Bob's gonna come first, okay. You guys
After
don't
the
mind?
team, and then the
Okay. I'm just following what Jen tells me to do.
I just feel a lot.
Go in order.
I'll do what the judge says.
Certainly.
Thank you.
All right. You don't want to make judge mad.
Yeah, I have been volunteered, so good evening, everybody. My name is Bob Sarr. I live in Madison on 615 North Egan Avenue. Appreciate the chance to come on and talk to the commission this evening. And obviously, a number of the neighbors are here as well. I put down some thoughts in writing that relate to some of the zoning issues. And firstly, I want to thank the commissioners for considering the concerns of the neighbors in the historic district when dealing with possible new development, putting the moratorium in place, and that was very much appreciated. I wasn't sure exactly what the time frame would be for discussing possible solutions, and I don't know if what was proposed last week is seen as a solution or not, but here we are as a group with, I think, some concerns about the new proposed ordinance, plus I think some suggestions on maybe the way we could propose moving forward with some new standards for the city to consider. And I think a lot of my remarks parallel what Judge Tucker sent to all of you via email this morning. So I posed 4 questions. The first one looks at the issue of what is family under the city ordinance. It includes currently up to 6 unrelated people. We've looked at some of the other cities in eastern South Dakota, and some have addressed the ramifications of having up to 6 by reducing that number to 3. And I think that would be definitely a step in the right direction and help deal with some of the issues that we're having up in our neighborhood. I'm going to skip the second one, but I want to come back to that in just a minute. The third question I outlined on behalf of my wife and me was the issue of this congregate dwellings. And we do have some concerns about that. Frankly, it was kind of news to us until I read it in the Daily Leader that was coming forward. It allows, through my reading, up to 4 dwellings. And with the current situation that we had with the project being built on North Egan, that was utilizing the provision in the city ordinance that allows up to 2 dwellings. Now we're moving that up to 4. So if I'm doing my math and understanding it, and maybe I'm not, but right, if you had 4, you'd take that times 6, you'd have 24 people. And we already are anticipating a very negative impact to 12 unit or 12 person buildings going in. So our suggestion would be, let's talk about that, look at it carefully, and consider just dropping the standard down to 2 if you enact it, which would be consistent with the 2-family dwellings.
So you're saying north of,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think the proposal is 3 to 4 as a permitted use.
No, 3 to 4 is conditional use. They have to go through a variance. Permitted use is 2 dwellings.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Yep, I appreciate that. I'm sorry.
but no, my apologies, I'm just diving in here. North of you, there's 2 lots, correct? And they're putting 2 dwellings on each lot
With 12 people in
with,
each dwelling.
with 6 bedrooms in each dwelling? Okay.
That is correct, yeah.
Well, yeah. Per building, it's 12 bedrooms,
Right.
just so we're sure
But
of that.
they're calling each building
Right.
2 dwellings with 6 rooms, correct?
That's my understanding.
Right, okay.
So this one said as permitted use or variance or whatever, that you could do up to 3 to 4 units. That would, we already had some concerns about 12 unrelated adults living in that type of situation. This would take that to 24 potentially.
Did we ever, was that ever, we're here mostly to listen, but I do have to ask some clarifying
Yeah.
questions.
Well,
Was that ever
please do.
ameliorated in any way, that issue, that concern that there might be 24 people? I thought somewhere along the line, we, either through zoning or through just good practice, we said, no, that's not what we're looking for here. We're looking for 6 in each. Was there anything ever any response to that at all? And yet?
The zoning commissioners, they went ahead and went 2 for principal use, 2 dwellings, and they also put in there 3 to 4 be conditional, where they have to go through,
Okay.
jump through the hoops to get it. So, yeah.
What's your original question?
My original question was, that's come up before, that this could potentiate 24 people living in those 2 dwellings, 12 in each.
I think that would not be allowed under the ordinance. I think
What's,
under the 2-family dwelling, I think the maximum you're supposed to have would be 6 and 6, so 12 in one building. You know,
So that-
I can't say if somebody has a guest or not, but
No, but I'm just
but
saying,
it would-
you know, I just want to make sure that, I'd struggle with that a little bit myself,
Yeah.
24 people in those 2. But I thought we had kind of cited family part of the ordinance saying
so that
6
what would be, my understanding what is being built now, you have 2 buildings, they're on separate lots, it's got replatted, they each have 6 and 6 configuration, so there's 12 bedrooms on the first lot, 12 on the second.
Okay.
So that's what is permitted, and what we're suggesting as a group is you take the 6 for future development and drop that to 3, like you see in Brookings and Sioux Falls, to limit the number of unrelated people living the same thing. Under this congregate living standard, it is 1 to 2, but getting a variance, you can move up to 3 to 4. So 4 times 6, that would take it to 24 on a single lot, so to speak. And I think that would obviously, be of great concern to us. That would be an awful lot on these narrow, a lot of people living on narrow lots in our neighborhood. And then the last one is, we did like to see in the part on the congregate living as a requirement that they look at having 1 off-street parking spot per bedroom or sleeping quarters, and I think that would be a good standard, not just for those, but for other dwellings that weren't either single-family, or modular, or twin home. The units north of us going in don't have that requirement now, so we think that would be a good standard to help deal with the off-street parking. So those are the 3 of the 4 issues, and the one I did want to talk a little bit about, and I think it's probably a conversation better had at the Planning Commission, but again, I don't know if we're going to get a chance to go there or not.
I don't think this will go back to the planning.
Okay.
So,
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll say my piece on point number 2. One of the odd things we have in our neighborhood, and my wife reminded me of this the other day when we were trying to figure out what was going on with congregate living, is if you look at the 2 blocks that are along North Egan Avenue, if you go to the zoning map that I put in your materials, you're probably familiar with these 2 blocks. They're off the west side of campus, and it's the block that John Draper and I live on. That's the southern of the 2 blocks that I've circled with the red circle, and then it's the block just north of that. And you have a really odd situation here, and it's because of the creek, I believe, where you have essentially not just, this is a block, but it's really the size of 6 blocks, 4 to 6 or more blocks by Madison standard. We don't have any side streets. We don't have any alleys. And when you look at development, especially if they're higher density, multi-unit development, without those side streets, without the alleys to give some relief to the issues of parking, access, you really are putting a lot of strains on the neighbors and on Egan Avenue as a corridor. Again, because of the nature of the front of the lots along the street being very narrow. I mean, they're similar to some, but they're pretty narrow compared to the depth of the lot. I think the nature of those lots somewhat create the problems that we're seeing, or potential problems that might happen. If you look at those 2 blocks, you'll notice the west side of those blocks is that darker yellow, which is R90. The east side of the blocks are the lighter color, which is R60. And one of the things that we've thought about for a while in our household is maybe a way to help alleviate some of these issues on these blocks that have limited access would be to move the R90 that's on the west side of these blocks, apply that R90 standard to the east side of the blocks as well, bordering Egan Avenue, and then you would have some protections for the existing landowners and acknowledge that these blocks are unusual by Madison standard and by most standards. I mean, you normally aren't going to have blocks this size that have absolutely no side streets, absolutely no alley access, no way in or out other than directly off the front of the streets. So, when you go looking at beyond just the number of people and some of these other issues that are important to kind of what the broader solution might be or the long-term solution, we would just put to this commission that a good result might be to take the R90 and along that corridor from 5th Street up to 9th, move it so that the blocks in question are uniform. You're not having a situation where the west side of the block is R90, the east side is R60. And I think that would help resolve a lot of these issues about future development if you could, put that into place along those lots or along those blocks.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion to consider, I think.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Bob, I just wanted to make sure, when you talked about these 2 buildings that were going up, in our zoning, they said for each dwelling they needed to be 2 parking, off-street parking for each dwelling. So according to our zones, they needed 4 and 4 for each structure.
Right.
Okay.
Thank
Just
you.
wanted, and they went above that. They're at 8. They're not 1 bedroom, 1 parking.
Right.
But they have went above our zoning and went with 8, just to make sure everybody knows that. And I think the last time they were here, they weren't opposed to looking at maybe putting some more parking in the back.
Okay.
They have to jump through some hoops because that's in the floodway. So, but they weren't. So hopefully if that goes through, they will have one parking
Okay.
per bedroom.
Well, I'm sure everybody would appreciate that, and they're right smack in the middle of that landlocked, 6-block there. So they're in a spot where they are really going to impact the fellow neighbors because there's no side streets, there's no alleys. And you understand this as well. A lot of around the campus, it's either no parking or restricted parking. So, I mean, there is not the safety valves that we have in other parts of Madison, either where it was, the newer stuff, you guys get the platting right. There's plenty of these things considered in advance. Appreciate that, but we're in a weird spot where you have huge blocks, older part of town, no side streets, no alleys, a creek. So it really, especially when you put into high density, that seems to be happening, it really puts some strains on the residents and the neighborhoods.
Mr. Sauer, 2 things. Thanks for all the time you spent on this, and
Yeah, thank you.
thanks for the map. Very handy.
You're certainly welcome.
Good
Thank you.
graphics.
We do have a hearing and a second reading scheduled for next week on
Right.
this ordinance 1613.
So you're proposing that we consider changing that R 60 to R90, understanding that would only affect future development.
Right.
I know Chad isn't here. He had class and was coming, thought maybe he would make it back, but he indicated to me that you could petition for, to change that zoning, if everybody was in agreement on it.
Thank you. I just want to, again, thank
Yeah.
the commission, thank all of you for your accessibility and understanding of the situation, and hopefully find a positive solution. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anytime. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And good evening. My name's Tim Tucker. I live in the same area. I had sent all of you earlier an email today. I've got copies of that if anybody needs a copy of that. I was working in Sioux Falls and wasn't sure if I was going to be back in time for the meeting. And I'll just go over a couple points. I won't restate everything that Mr. Sauer did a good job addressing. First of all, with regards to the congregate living ordinance, I wanted to address that. The congregate living is in essence renting a bedroom. So you're renting one room. The current residences that are just going in now, that have the 2 apartments on each lot, 6 bedrooms in each apartment. So it's 6 in the bottom level, 6 in the top level. There are 12 bedrooms, and they potentially will each have a separate lease. And so we have 24 people renting those apartments in those 2 lots. That is high density. The whole idea of defining in a zoning ordinance congregate housing because of its high density is that you're able to define it and then move it to the high density zoning areas, such as large apartment buildings. So if we define it but don't move it, we haven't accomplished anything. We're in essence allowing the high density, and with the potential for having a conditional use to put in 4 apartments instead of 2 apartments. Without changes, you're looking at 24 separate leases for each building, 48 apartments on 2 lots for future development. This one is going to be 12 rentals on 2 lots. We have a few parking spaces that the mayor has mentioned. And Mayor, you can correct me, was it going to be 8 designated parking
Yes.
spaces?
They put 8 for each building.
So if we have 24 people in those 2 buildings, each with their own lease, we're looking at 24 vehicles. We'll have 16 parking spaces. We're going to have 8 extra vehicles parking presumably on the street. Egan Avenue is a very condensed area. We've got the university parking right there that during the day fills up all of the streets. Now we're going to add 8 more potentially long-term parking spots without any additional growth beyond that. With the congregate living, if you have 4 apartments with potentially 6 people, the way it's written now, you've got 24 people on each lot, you've got 48 people, it just really becomes a nightmare. If we're looking at that high density population for congregate living, typically a city moves that out to the edges where you have your large apartment buildings and where you have your high density population areas. That's the whole purpose of the zoning, is to address the development within the city, have the high density in the fringe areas around the town so they have easier access, so you don't have congestion problems, you don't have the law enforcement issues, you don't have fire issues with the higher density areas that you have. So I've got a few suggestions that you can look at potentially to address it. One that Mr. Saar mentioned, reducing the non-related number of people in an apartment from 6 to 3. That would put us consistent with Brookings and Sioux Falls. I haven't checked other areas, other cities, but those are cities within our area that have university populations that are addressing these issues. That is unrelated adults in an apartment. So that reduces the potential congestion right there. Second, if you are adopting a congregate living ordinance that authorizes the high-density apartments, move those into your high-density zoning areas. That's really where they belong. You have really that defined in your zoning ordinances, that it's high-density population. So define it, move it where it's appropriate in the current zoning ordinances, and that addresses the concerns about the density, fire protection, police protection, parking that occurs. I would note, congregate living houses are in essence boarding houses. They are designed to accommodate a high number of people in a small space at low cost. And that's what boarding houses are. Some areas you see boarding houses that you can rent a room by the hour, by the day. I don't know what our zoning ordinances are related to that or what any potential developer plans, but the high density is designed to go in high density areas. That's why we have our zoning ordinances, is to address that. So we would ask for that to be addressed. That really addresses the main points that I wish to make. Bob's addressed the other points.
Can I ask Tim a question?
Yes.
Would you say, I mean, this is just kind of thinking, this isn't, it's only happened once in a while with me, so I got to get out my can here. But would you say that when the high-rise was built, they were considering that high density? And it's not a trick question, I'm not looking for anything, I'm just kind of mulling that around, listening to your definition of high density.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
On what the high rise was designed for. I would consider it high density, just the number of apartments in a limited space But I can't tell you when they designed it, what they referred to.
George, did you have something? Did you have any idea on that?
But
Did you have an answer to
on the
that?
high-rise,
Yeah.
that was, in the beginning, was built strictly for elderly people.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just curiosity, because I was thinking, where is our high density? I mean, I know we zoned high density or where it is, but I was just thinking, why was that built right in the center like
Yeah.
that? And
Yeah.
would it have been considered high density? Thank you.
Yeah, I would note it apparently is coming up next week, and because of the Thanksgiving vacation, I am not going to be here next week, but I would certainly ask that you consider my email and the proposed amendments that the neighborhood is looking at in your consideration of those ordinances.
Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, thank
You guys
you.
have put a lot of
Thank
thought
you.
into this. Thank you.
John?
They covered everything.
They covered everything? Okay.
Wasn't sure if they're all gonna be here.
All right. Well,
You,
I'm good.
okay.
You're just pointing. How about?
Don't want to leave anybody out.
Okay, public comments over. Announcements. Oh, Gary.
I'd just like to say that we've been working on these cricks, and Gale Manufacturing let us use a track-driven skid steer with a mower on the front, and it's just phenomenal. And I'd like to thank them for letting us use that.
It's amazing the amount that we've got done.
Yeah. We probably did in one day what we've done in 3 years. So
Really?
it's just, it goes in areas that we can never get to. It kind of floats. So we have got it stuck, but it's a lot harder than the other ones.
The main thing was to thank Gail for their.
Yep.
for letting us-
Promotional video for
Prototype that.
good testimony. Budget next year for one.
That's it, you see, 2021.
Okay. All right.
Awesome.
Anything else, Gary?
Nope, that's all right.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting us know that.
Yeah.
And letting the public know it as well. I appreciate that.
Announcements. I have announcements for the commissioners here. We're looking at starting on the budget on Thursday at 9. We picked Thursday at 9 because we're going to go into exec session at 12 for the Teamsters and personnel. Just want to make sure you guys would be available.
When do you need an answer by?
Are we on with the special meeting? Special meeting at 12 for contract negotiations and personnel.
Which they knew about that, but we're also
Right.
talking now about the adding at 9 o'clock. Budget considerations.
I'm good.
We can let you know, or I can let you know, like, maybe tomorrow by noon.
Yeah.
I
That's where
gotta
I'm
check
at.
calendars and schedules. This is, I didn't expect it.
So we're on for the special meeting, correct? I've got responses from almost all of you. Move forward. I just need to post an agenda in a timely manner.
And you're talking about the contract
I'm
negotiation?
talking about the contract, I'm talking about the 12 o'clock meeting for contract negotiations, and then followed up by a quick personnel discussion for you.
They should be in town at that time.
Yeah, that'll work for me.
Okay, we'll get that one posted, and we'll follow up with, you will follow up about the budget meeting at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay?
Any other
In-
announcements?
In the meantime, gentlemen, several new documents were posted today. A couple of them were updated. The one you need to look the closest at is your capital outlay here. That has got all of the major projects. Your draft budget ordinance was also posted today. Please take a look ahead of time as much as you can. Contact me with any questions. We'll talk through anything we need to talk through.
Are we having department heads as well?
That's up to you guys.
I guess we will.
It's a public meeting, so
Right.
Yeah, it's a
anybody
public
can
meeting.
attend.
I would
I
welcome
would leave it
department
up
heads to
to,
be there.
I'll have them on speed dial.
Yeah. we can do this.
If we have questions, yeah, I mean, it'd be easier just to answer it. Otherwise, we'll just cut budgets and then answer it later.
Vicious.
Okay.
Again, questions for me between now and then, please holler.
Seeing nothing under executive session, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
A motion to adjourn in a second. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. Thank you.